Hey guys, this is Andrew Wright with another episode of Review the Right Thing. How is everybody? In this episode, I'll be talking about my first 4K release. This is Shutter Island, brought to us courtesy of Paramount Pictures. And I really believe this is one of Scorsese's prettiest and most colorful movies. It was shot by cinematographer Robert Richardson. 4K boasts a 2160p UHD transfer. The increased color palette is beautiful, and the image is sharp and crisp. The increased color palette really allows colors to just pop out. The reds of blood in World War II flashbacks are very saturated. Greens of the landscapes are lush. The concrete structure of the prison building is finely detailed. Dream sequences are always full of color and therefore come across beautifully with the added color palette of the UHD. Skin tones and facial textures are given an added boost, and many close-ups in the movie allow you to really see how detailed the image gets. Clothing textures remain organic and retain the appearance of an old clothing and uniforms that these characters would have been wearing at the time. Since I used the trailer in my videos, I could see the improvements the 4K has. The trailer is an HD trailer, but compared to the transfer of the 4K, the colors are a tad muted and detail is not as sharp. The audio track on this disc is a 5.1 DTS HD master. The track gives a nice balance to the music, sound effects, and dialogue. A large portion of the movie is stormy, and the track does a great job of rendering those effects. During the search of the island, when Teddy Daniels goes back to the cliffside for Chuck, we get to experience the crashing of the waves and ocean sounds as Teddy shouts for his partner. The music in this movie was well thought out and doesn't actually use a score. The music was all done under the supervision of Robbie Robertson from the band, and is a mixed usage of classical tunes that were chosen to convey the emotion of these characters and what they are going through. Some of these tunes, which I found out from one of the featurettes, could be heard as sound effects, but are in fact excerpts from classical songs. I won't give away where these are in the movie because they only gave one example, but once they pointed it out, I found it really interesting. I'm not super familiar with much classical. I know some composers and some of their more popular work, but when they pointed that little fact out, I thought it was really cool how they chose the music for different scenes. There were no special features on the 4K disc, which I think is weird because the space allows for more than the feature, some scene selections, and the audio setup. The Blu-ray that is packaged with it has two short featurettes. The first, titled Behind the Shutters, was an interview with cast and crew. In this featurette, they conversed with Dennis Lehane, the writer of the book that the movie was adapted from, and how it was adapted to the screenplay. Scorsese discusses briefly why he chose Leo for the main role. The next featurette on the disc is called Into the Lighthouse. This included more interviews with the cast as well as a psychiatrist, James Gilligan, whose role was to advise the cast and crew about the violent behavior of some of the mentally ill and how that was answered with more violence and barbaric practices from the treatment hospitals and prisons these patients were being held at. He was also there to answer questions that these actors had in order to get into the mindset of the mental patients that they portray. Questions could include the why to violent acts or what possibly triggers them. He was one of the pioneering psychologists who began to pave the way for more effective and moral treatments as opposed to the older violent methods such as electrotherapy or lobotomization. These treatment practices in the 50s and earlier on the mentally ill were the reason that Dennis Lehane chose 54 for the setting of this book and the following movie. At this time is when people like Dr. James Gilligan began to look into more humanistic ways for treating patients instead of the mindset of drugging them or possible lobotomies. Ben Kingsley's character represented this new approach to medicine in which they try to talk to them and find the root of the issue, whereas Max von Sydow represents the old and wants to strap them down and try these barbaric techniques that he believes work. It was interesting how these characters represented a real battle psychologists at the time were having. Would be great to see more features on a movie that's a decade old now, so that's kind of a stinker for this release. It's packaged in a great-looking steelbook with similar artwork to previous releases. The image is filtered in a red, which is then the color of the steelbook packaging. I'm a sucker for this type of packaging, and the transfer is great. Just wish it had more to offer in terms of special features. Overall, I'm still happy to see this come to 4K. Fans of the 4K format will surely find this release acceptable. I think 10 years later this movie stands out better than it did then. This is only my second viewing, but all the subtle acting these actors had to do to try to play multiple parts at once was amazing to see again. In fact, it made more of an impact on the second viewing. You can currently find this release at Best Buy or I'm sure anywhere else online. But it's $24.99 brand new, which I think is a pretty good price for a newer 4K release. So anyways, for those of you who already picked it up and purchased it, what did you guys think? How did you like the picture quality and the audio quality, overall packaging? Did you hate it? Did you love it? Anybody planning on picking it up later on down the line? Let me know in the comments below. And if you like this, hit subscribe to listen to more Review the Right Thing. Thanks again.